Here is the rundown of 8 Hollywood heavy hitters who completely wrecked their mugs with buccal fat removal because Tinseltown has always been obsessed with chasing the unattainable perfect face. But we have to ask what happens when the hottest cosmetic trend of the moment backfires spectacularly, leaving our favourite stars looking not younger or fresher, but hollowed out gaunt, and frankly decades older than the date on their birth certificate. Welcome to the dark world of buccal fat removal, otherwise known as plastic surgery's biggest factory of regret and buyer's remorse. This is the exact procedure that countless celebrities are frantically trying to reverse right now, according to a top-tier Beverly Hills plastic surgeon who spilled the tea on the condition of strict anonymity. The massive issue here is simple anatomy. Once you go in and scoop that essential fat pad out of your cheeks, it is gone forever and there is no natural way to bring it back. And let me tell you what looked trendy, snatched and sculpted when you were 25 ends up looking skeletal, harsh and severely aged by the time you hit 35. Unlike other cosmetic tweaks like fillers that can be dissolved or Botox that eventually fades away, buccal fat removal is a permanent one-way ticket. It fundamentally alters your facial architecture by extracting the deep pockets of fat that are responsible for giving cheeks their natural youthful fullness and bounce. The surgery promises to give you those razor-sharp cheekbones and a slimmer profile, but in reality it often delivers something much more sinister, rapid, premature aging that you cannot undo. We are currently witnessing a massive epidemic of young starlets walking around with what I call surgery face, explained a veteran Hollywood casting director who has seen it all. These girls walk into the clinic wanting to look like high fashion supermodels, but they walk out looking like they have time travelled 20 years into the future. The cheek hollowing is particularly aging because that sunken look is something our brains naturally associate with elderly faces, not fresh, youthful ones. What makes this viral trend particularly devastating for these actors is the absolute irreversibility of the damage. While you can easily melt away bad lip filler and wait for the Botox to wear off, this surgery permanently evicts a crucial part of your facial anatomy. That fat is not just extra weight, it is the structural tissue that actually helps maintain a youthful, supported appearance as we naturally lose volume with age. It is essentially the plastic surgery equivalent of chopping off your bangs during a mental breakdown at 3 in the morning. Noted a celebrity image consultant, except these bangs never grow back and they make you look like your own grandmother. Today we are deep diving into 8 high-profile celebrities whose faces were dramatically and often negatively transformed by this controversial procedure. We are talking about everyone from the former Disney darling whose fairy tale features morphed into something unnervingly sharp and unrecognisable, to the stunning model turned mannequin whose once soft, ethereal beauty has been replaced by something suspiciously sculpted and rigid. These cautionary tales reveal the incredibly dark side of chasing every single fleeting cosmetic trend that pops up on social media. And it highlights how the desperate pursuit of Instagram perfect angles is creating a lost generation of stars who have surgically fast-forwarded their faces into premature old age. But first we have to look at our most dramatic before and after case study of the bunch. The Broadway belter, whose journey from a fresh-faced ingenue to a hollow-cheeked stranger has fans and industry insiders alike whispering what on earth happened to her face. We are looking at the transformation of Lea Michele from Glee superstar to gaunt and severe. When Lea Michele first burst onto the scene back in 2009 as the ambitious Rachel Berry on Glee, she had a very specific look. Her fresh-faced, youthful appearance complemented her character's teenage enthusiasm perfectly, featuring naturally full cheeks and a charmingly rounded face shape. She embodied a relatable girl next door kind of pretty that really helped audiences connect with her intense, ambitious character on a deeper level. Fast forward to 2026, and fans are practically doing double takes whenever she makes a red carpet appearance because the change is that drastic. She was once famous for her youthful full face, noted a celebrity esthetician who has worked with numerous top-tier television stars over the years. Michelle had what we call in the industry a baby face, those round full cheeks that gave her a perpetually youthful appearance no matter her actual age. It was a huge part of her charm and worked perfectly for her early career roles, but around 2016, subtle changes began appearing in Michelle's facial structure. By the time 2018 rolled around, the transformation was absolutely impossible to ignore for anyone paying attention. The once soft, welcoming contours of her cheeks had been completely replaced by sharply defined hollows, creating a much more angular, severe and mature-looking face. She allegedly underwent buccal fat removal and now appears significantly older and sharper than she did just a few years ago, explained the esthetician. While she has never publicly confirmed having the procedure, the visual changes are textbook consistent with what we see in aggressive buccal fat removal cases. There is a very specific kind of deep hollowing right under the cheekbones that is extremely difficult to achieve through diet or exercise alone. What makes Michelle's transformation particularly striking and somewhat tragic is how dramatically it aged her overall appearance in such a short time. In her early Glee days, she looked younger than her actual age, which was a massively beneficial trait for an actress playing high school characters well into her 20s. Post-procedure, however, many fans and industry observers note that she now appears significantly older than her actual years. She went from fresh-faced and bubbly to prematurely hollow and severe, observed a casting director who works primarily in network television, noting that it is actually limiting from a casting perspective. She is not even 40 years old yet, but the angular hollowing makes her incredibly difficult to cast in younger, softer roles now. It creates a permanent aging effect that even the best professional makeup can only partially disguise under harsh studio lights. The timing of Michelle's facial transformation notably coincided with her transition from television to returning to her Broadway roots, sparking plenty of rumours. It was a major career shift that some insiders suggest might have influenced her drastic cosmetic choices to fit a different mould. There is a completely different aesthetic standard on Broadway versus television, explained a theatre producer familiar with Michelle's career trajectory. The unforgiving nature of intense stage lighting, combined with the distance from a theatre audience, demands exaggerated, hyper-defined facial features to register at all. However, the tragedy is that the heavy contouring and structural changes that pop under Broadway spotlights often look incredibly harsh and jarring when viewed through the unforgiving lens of a high-definition camera or face-to-face. The social media firestorm surrounding Lea Michelle's radically transformed appearance has been a mixed bag, to say the least, but the sentiment is overwhelmingly negative. Instead of praise, her comment section is flooded with waves of confusion and genuine concern from longtime followers who feel like they are looking at a stranger. You cannot scroll through her latest posts without stumbling over thousands of comments reminiscing about the past, with fans lamenting that she was so much prettier and fresher before she touched her face. The internet is practically begging for answers, with endless threads dedicated to the singular burning question: what on earth happened to the unique face we all knew? A leading celebrity esthetician weighed in to clarify the situation, noting that the issue isn't that the work is botched or that she looks objectively bad. She's still undeniably stunning. The real problem is that she has effectively erased her identity and no longer looks like the Lea Michelle the world recognises. There is a heartbreaking disconnect between the fresh-faced, relatable star that fans grew to love during her early television years and the severe, angular and significantly more mature-looking woman who now poses somewhat stiffly on the red carpets of 2026. Michelle's polarising case highlights a disturbing and increasingly common pattern among Hollywood elites who undergo this specific procedure, chasing a trend that often backfires. What usually starts as an innocent desire for that sharp, model-esque facial definition frequently results in a gaunt effect, causing premature aging that is nearly impossible to reverse once the tissue is gone. They are essentially trading away the youthful fullness and collagen that would have allowed them to age gracefully in exchange for a hollowed-out, sculpted look that ironically makes them appear 10 years older than they actually are. While Michelle's transformation has been undeniably dramatic and sparked headlines, experts argue that her results still fall within the realm of looking somewhat human. However, our next subject's facial metamorphosis has taken this obsession with the snatched aesthetic to its absolute terrifying limit, resulting in a look that barely resembles her original self. She once reminisced about her childhood, describing massive spreads of food and a hearty appetite that was just like everyone else's growing up. She joked that her father never cooks for just 4 people because, as anyone with Arab heritage knows, Arab parents instinctively cook enough feasts to feed 50 people at a time. We are talking about Bella Hadid, the ultimate case study of model to mannequin. As the daughter of reality star Yolanda Hadid and the younger sister of the Golden Girl Gigi, she had massive shoes to fill. Bella entered the cutthroat modelling world with significant genetic advantages, but she also faced crushing pressure to carve out her own identity when she first hit the scene back in the mid-2010s. In those early days, her face was defined by naturally soft contours, a gentle nose and rounded cheeks that were undeniably beautiful in a classic girl next door way. However, she did not yet possess those razor-sharp, high-fashion angles that her escalating career and the unforgiving industry standards would eventually demand from her. The physical transformation that followed over the next few years has arguably become one of the most dissected and debated facial evolutions in the history of modern modelling. Although she has never publicly confirmed the specific surgeries, a top fashion photographer who has shot numerous Vogue covers explained that her dramatic cheek changes scream of buccal fat removal. When Bella first started walking runways, she possessed a more conventional, accessible beauty that audiences found relatable and sweet. Yet within a staggeringly short few years, her face developed cavernous hollows and sharp geometrical angles that simply do not occur naturally, especially in a woman barely out of her teens. The structural changes to Hadid's face were neither subtle nor gradual. They appeared to happen relatively suddenly between 2016 and 2018, shocking onlookers. Red carpet photos and runway appearances from that era began to show a distinctly more sculpted mid-face with pronounced shadow-casting hollowing beneath her cheekbones. These alterations created angles much sharper than anything present in her earlier portfolio, giving her a look that was less human and more architectural. Critics and fans alike argue that her face has lost all its natural softness and now looks over-sculpted, with the photographer noting she has crossed into the uncanny valley. The modelling industry certainly prizes defined bone structure, but there is a dangerous tipping point where a face crosses from being enhanced to looking completely artificial and manufactured. Many veteran industry insiders feel Bella may have sprinted past that line, creating a visage that looks striking in still fashion photography, but reads as jarringly unnatural in video or normal daylight. What makes Hadid's case particularly notable and perhaps tragic is how her radical facial transformation coincided perfectly with her meteoric rise to supermodel status. As her cheeks hollowed out and her features sharpened into weaponized angles, her bookings for high-end luxury brands skyrocketed. This success seemed to professionally validate her aesthetic choices, reinforcing the surgery even while it generated mixed, often horrified reactions from the general public. She went from a living, breathing model to a walking mannequin, observed a veteran fashion editor who has watched her career trajectory closely. The supreme irony here is that while this ultra-sculpted alien look may photograph dramatically for avant-garde editorials, it actually severely limits her versatility as a talent. Those severe cutting angles create a specific cold look that works for high-concept fashion, but fails to translate to commercial work-worn beauty campaigns or acting roles requiring relatability. Furthermore, the cultural impact of Hadid's surgically altered appearance extends far beyond her own lucrative career and magazine covers. As one of the world's most photographed and influential women, her specific facial aesthetic has helped normalize an extremely unattainable sculpted look for the masses. Countless young women are now rushing to clinics to pursue this exact aesthetic, often without understanding the permanent, irreversible consequences of removing facial fat. Bella has become the reference photo that ethical plastic surgeons absolutely dread seeing, revealed a prominent Beverly Hills surgeon specializing in facial reconstruction. He explained that young patients constantly come in clutching photos of her, completely unaware of the reality behind the image. They do not realise that achieving that level of extreme facial hollowing often requires a cocktail of multiple invasive procedures, not just simple buccal fat removal. They fail to understand that what looks striking on a dimly lit runway or a filtered Instagram post will look gaunt, skeletal, and aged in the harsh light of everyday life. Unlike some celebrities who maintain a strict code of silence regarding their cosmetic enhancements, Hadid has taken a confusing middle path. She neither confirms nor denies her current procedures, yet she openly acknowledges regretting the nose job she received as a teenager, which adds a layer of complexity. This selective transparency has led to even rampant speculation and conspiracy theories about what other potential enhancements she is hiding. What is particularly concerning about Bella's influence is that her look is fundamentally not achievable through natural means like diet or exercise. The surgeon concluded with a grim warning. Young women see her and think it is just makeup or contouring, when in reality it is heavy surgical modification. Consequently, these stars find themselves locked into irreversible surgical modifications, all in a desperate bid to keep up with an aesthetic trend that is guaranteed to vanish. And even though Hadid is currently riding high on a wave of career triumphs with her snatch new look veteran, industry whispers suggest major anxiety about the long-term fallout of such aggressive facial sculpting so early in life. When you surgically excise those crucial natural fat pads, you are essentially removing the structural scaffolding that keeps a face looking youthful and vibrant. This creates a ticking time bomb regarding how this hollowed-out severe aesthetic is going to hold up as she navigates her 30s and enters middle age. Now, unlike our previous two case studies who play the game of plausible deniability, neither confirming nor denying they went under the knife, our next subject completely flipped the script, taking the incredibly rare route of actually admitting to her buccal fat removal and even sharing her complicated emotions about the outcome. To have an entire support system rallying behind you and to be the face of this moment, it is honestly just a magical, surreal experience. And I am genuinely thrilled for you because you bring such a massive amount of happiness to everyone watching. Enter Chrissy Teigen, the celebrity who actually confessed. We exist in an entertainment landscape where 99% of stars meet plastic surgery rumours with stone-cold denials or calculated silence, but Chrissy Teigen chose to be the outlier, openly detailing her aesthetic tweaks, specifically the choice to scoop out her cheek fat. This level of brutal honesty provides us with a uniquely valuable case study, offering a peek behind the curtain at both the grim reality of the surgery itself and the messy, complicated regret that can settle in after permanently altering your face. She didn't just hint at it, she publicly owned the fact that she had buccal fat removed, according to a veteran celebrity journalist who has been tracking Teigen's ups and downs for years. Back in late 2021, Teigen hopped on her Instagram stories to explicitly confirm the work was done, even pointing a finger at the specific hollows in her cheeks where the doctor operated. That degree of candour regarding cosmetic intervention is practically unheard of for a woman of her level of fame, but Teigen went further than just dropping the name of the procedure. She actually opened up about the mental gymnastics behind her decision and how she felt about the initial look, posting her thoughts directly to social media. Honestly, I have zero regrets except for the fact that people seem to be furious at me when I gain weight and then equally furious at me when I lose it. The physical transformation of Teigen's visage following the operation was instant, undeniable and chronicled for the world to see. Because she lives her life online, we watched in real time as her signature round youthful face suddenly developed deep, cavernous hollows beneath the cheekbones, resulting in a sharp, angular look that erased the face we all knew. Fans immediately pointed out that her cheeks appeared drastically sunken in recent paparazzi shots, the journalist explained. The shift was especially jarring because Teigen's entire brand had been built around her accessible, full-faced beauty and expressive soft features. Suddenly, seeing those dramatic shadows and harsh contours carved under her cheekbones presented a completely alien facial aesthetic. But what makes the Teigen situation so fascinating is her commentary months later, where she started hinting that she had mixed emotions as the reality of the permanent change set in. In follow-up interviews, she suggested that while she wasn't spiralling into total regret, she had started to question if the surgery was actually necessary in the first place. She eventually admitted that she probably could have gone without it, observed a top Hollywood image consultant who analyses celebrity rebranding. You almost never see this kind of post-operative reflection sharing in the public sphere. The standard Hollywood playbook is to defend your plastic surgery to the death or pretend it never happened. Tegan's willingness to publicly second-guess her own permanent choices gives us a rare window into the complex psychology of facial alteration. It is also worth noting that Tegan went under the knife during a chaotic chapter of her life, coinciding with pregnancy, the aftermath of childbirth, and a massive public cancellation scandal. This context forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the psychological triggers that drive these irreversible decisions. Specifically, how the brutal onslaught of online commentary can warp a celebrity's self-image. She took ownership of the mistake, but unfortunately you can't reverse the look, the consultant noted. Tegan's transparency about the surgery and her subsequent wavering highlights the fundamental danger of trend-based cosmetic work. The tragic reality is that the permanence of the surgery lasts far longer than the trendy aesthetic that inspired it. For the general public, Tegan's journey serves as arguably the most clear-cut before and after example we have on this list. Her obsessive social media documentation spanning years before and after the event creates a perfect visual timeline of how buccal fat removal ages, serving as both a record and perhaps an accidental warning sign. However, while Tegan's buccal fat removal was a relatively isolated tweak, our next subject decided to undergo a complete and total overhaul of her entire being, utilising buccal fat removal as merely one weapon in a desperate, aggressive war against the natural ageing process. We are talking about Madonna, the queen of reinvention, who finally pushed the envelope until it tore. There is arguably no artist in history who has successfully shape-shifted as many times as Madonna has over the decades. From the lace gloves and rubber bracelets of the 80s to the polished Evita glamour and the rhinestone cowboy era, every single change felt like a deliberate artistic statement until the focus shifted entirely to her face, resulting in a look that has generated shock and worry rather than the applause she is used to. While the Queen of Pop keeps a tight lid on her medical files, hiding the exact timeline of her cosmetic journey industry, insiders aren't staying silent. There is a resounding consensus among top-tier surgeons that the dramatic shift in her visage isn't just natural aging, it's the undeniable result of buccal fat removal, playing a massive role in her new look. For years, whispers have circulated through the Hollywood Hills about a potent cocktail of aggressive lipid extraction and heavy-handed injectables being the culprit. One high-profile celebrity esthetician known for non-surgical mastery broke it down for us, explaining that what we're witnessing is far more complex than a simple nip and tuck. According to the analysis, Madonna isn't just displaying the results of a single trip to the clinic. We are likely looking at a trifecta of surgical intervention, strategic fat excision, the probable overuse of volume-adding fillers, and structural thread lifts to hoist everything upward. That signature hollowed-out look in the mid-face. That is the smoking gun for buccal fat removal, a feature completely absent from her facial architecture just a decade ago. The metamorphosis is nothing short of jarring. It's a complete departure from the face the world fell in love with. Think back to the Material Girl era, or even her Confessions tour. Her naturally plump cheeks were her trademark, keeping her looking incredibly youthful, well into her 40s and 50s. Today, those soft contours have been completely scooped out, replaced by severe, sharply defined caverns. At the same time, you have this bizarre contradiction where other zones of her face look incredibly swollen or pulled tight. Experts call this the compartmentalized effect. Essentially, it looks like different zip codes of her face are aging in completely different timelines because the procedures aren't blending cohesively. As the esthetician noted, the structure has been fundamentally altered, skin tight and shiny in some spots, while looking dangerously sunken in others. This clash between the overinflated zones and the hollowed-out valleys creates an uncanny valley effect. Instead of fooling the eye, it acts like a neon sign pointing directly at the aging process she's trying to outrun. That specific concavity in the buccal zone is a dead giveaway. It is the kind of hollowness usually reserved for extreme rapid weight loss, or as is more likely in this case, the result of a surgeon's scalpel removing the fat pads that provide structural support. But here is the real tragedy of Madonna's case. The cosmetic narrative has completely hijacked her artistic legacy. When she steps on stage now, the audience isn't whispering about the set list, they're analysing her jawline. The discourse has shifted from her groundbreaking music to her shocking visage. Comment sections are flooded with debates about her face rather than her creative output. For a woman whose provocations used to be about religion, sex and culture, it is a massive downgrade to simply be provocative because of aesthetic shock value. As one veteran music journalist who has chronicled her rise since the 80s put it, she sacrificed the volume in her face and the fans immediately clocked it. Madonna thrives on controversy, sure, but the headlines used to be about burning crosses or explicit books. The conversation used to centre on her genius and boundary-pushing art. Now, in 2026, social media feeds and public commentary are overwhelmingly obsessed with her dermatological choices. It has become an overwhelming distraction, effectively burying any discussion about her actual performance capabilities or new projects. The timing couldn't have been worse. Madonna decided to radically alter her face right as we entered the era where social media scrutiny hit its peak intensity. Back in the 90s, magazine spreads were airbrushed to oblivion and stage lighting was forgiving. She could control the image perfectly. Today, however, we live in a world of high-definition cameras and fan-captured smartphone footage. It is an unforgiving ecosystem where every tuck, filler and scar is dissected under a digital microscope. It highlights a cruel paradox, as the journalist explained. In her desperate sprint to pause time and stay forever young through aggressive intervention, she has manufactured a look that screams struggle. By erasing the natural signs of aging so aggressively, she has paradoxically drawn more attention to the fact that she is fighting father time, which makes her look older than if she had aged naturally. For the new generation of starlets rushing to get that chiselled look, Madonna stands as a massive red flag regarding the permanent consequences of extracting facial fat. Now navigating her mid-60s, she is living proof that removing facial fat while trendy in your 20s can be disastrous down the line. It accelerates the visual clock later in life, depriving the face of the very volume that would have kept her looking fresh and youthful naturally. While Madonna represents the extreme end of the spectrum, a total overhaul, our next case study, offers a lesson in subtlety that is just as impactful. We are looking at changes that are much quieter, but they have fundamentally altered the visage of one of Hollywood's coolest stars. It has effectively stripped away that fairy-like ethereal quality that made her stand out in the first place. I'm talking about icons David Bowie, Bob Marley, and personally, I was obsessed with the vibes of bands like No Doubt growing up. But today we are shifting focus to the offspring of rock royalty. We are talking about Zoe Kravitz and her journey from an ethereal beauty to what some are calling a structured or even emaciated aesthetic. Born with the ultimate genetic lottery ticket, courtesy of Lenny Kravitz and Lisa Bonet, Zoe hit the Hollywood scene with a face that was practically art. It was distinctive, characterised by a dreamy, ethereal softness. She possessed a rare harmony, balancing angular bone structure with enough baby fat to keep it approachable. However, over the last few years, we've watched a slow but deliberate shift. That unique soft aesthetic has been traded in for something much sharper. The hollowing out of her cheeks has sparked endless debates in beauty forums, and tabloids alike did she or didn't she undergo buccal fat removal? A veteran casting director who has tracked Kravitz's rise noted the difference immediately. She was known for that balance, they said. In the early days, Zoe had this perfect equilibrium. You could see the strong bone structure underneath, but it was draped in a youthful softness. Her cheeks held a natural fullness that acted as a buffer for her high cheekbones, softening the overall impact of her face. This combination created an almost otherworldly elfin beauty that made her the perfect candidate for fantasy roles or characters that required a delicate, dreamlike quality. The timeline of this transformation seems to pivot right around 2018 and 2019. Suddenly, at film premieres, the cameras caught a different angle. The mid-face wasn't just sculpted, it was vacant. The natural fullness that had once defined her smile was gone, replaced by shadow and bone. The natural harmony that once defined her visage has been starkly swapped out for deep, cavernous hollows right beneath her cheekbones, creating a look that is undeniably sculpted but honestly jarringly severe compared to her old self. In recent years, she has popped up on red carpets looking significantly more skeletal. A drastic shift that immediately set the rumour mill on fire with whispers of buccal fat removal, according to a top-tier casting director familiar with the situation. This wasn't the kind of slow, subtle change you expect from natural ageing or simply dropping a few pounds. It happened with a speed and intensity that raises eyebrows. There is a glaring before and after contrast here that screams surgical intervention, bearing all the telltale signs of a procedure rather than any biological process we are used to seeing. What makes Kravitz's aesthetic overhaul so shocking to fans and critics alike is specifically how it annihilated the unique quality that made her famous in the first place. That distinct softness was exactly what set her apart from the cookie-cutter clones saturating her generation of Hollywood talent. The ethereal, approachable glow that gave her such a magnetic appeal has been aggressively traded in for the rigid, unforgiving angles and hollows that the fashion industry tries to convince us is the gold standard. One prominent fashion photographer who has shot Kravitz multiple times put it bluntly, she used to look like a dream, but now she just looks exhausted and drained of life. There is a tragic irony in this transformation that is impossible to ignore when you look at the trajectory of her career. By chasing this hyper trend of razor-sharp bone structure, she has actually homogenized herself, blending in with a standardized ideal while losing the singular magic that made her a star. Interestingly, the timeline of Kravitz's facial reconstruction perfectly aligns with her snagging massive blockbuster gigs, like her high-profile turn as Catwoman in The Batman back in 2022. It is entirely possible that these darker, grittier projects demanded a villainous, angular aesthetic that her naturally softer face couldn't provide without a little help. This professional context forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about the intense, unspoken mandates placed on women to alter their biology for a paycheck. As one industry insider explained, actresses are constantly under the gun to sharpen up their faces as they transition from the girl next door to leading lady status. There is a pervasive silent rule in Tinseltown that female superstars must possess a specific kind of facial architecture to survive the scrutiny of extreme close-ups. The camera is obsessed with angles and shadows, and agents often whisper to their clients, sometimes not so subtly, that a defined, hollowed-out face simply photographs better than a round, youthful one. The internet, predictably, has been torn apart over Kravitz's new, severe aesthetic, sparking heated debates across every social media platform. While a faction of the fan base worships her new, snatched, model-esque vibe, a massive number of people are mourning the loss of the fresh, unique face they originally fell in love with. If you scroll through the comments, you see the same sentiment repeated over and over. She looks incredibly high fashion. Now, sure, but she also looks like everyone else. Even though Kravitz is still booking A-list roles and cementing her status as a global style icon, the conversation around her face refuses to die down. Veteran industry watchers warn that her metamorphosis is just one symptom of a terrifying trend, the total homogenization of young Hollywood, where everyone buys the same face. And make no mistake, buccal fat removal is the primary weapon of choice in this war on facial volume, creating this uniform, gaunt aesthetic we see everywhere. Now we need to talk about our next subject, whose facial evolution is perhaps the most shocking and comprehensive overhaul on our entire list. We are talking about a systematic step-by-step reinvention that has left her looking like a complete stranger compared to the fresh-faced breakout star we met years ago. I am literally sewn into this dress, so I'm just trying to be incredibly careful not to burst it open right here, she joked on the red carpet. I, for some reason, convinced myself this was going to be a casual PTA meeting with like 10 people, so I didn't prepare a speech at all. She laughed. This is the saga of Megan Fox, a journey from fresh-faced perfection to what many are calling a fabricated reality. When Megan Fox first exploded onto the scene and into the global consciousness with Transformers. In 2007, her beauty was so striking it felt almost otherworldly. She possessed flawless skin, impeccable symmetry, and a natural fullness to her cheeks that perfectly balanced her already defined bone structure. Her face wasn't just pretty. It became the blueprint for an entire generation, with millions of young women marching into clinics holding her photo as the ultimate goal. But fast forward 15 years and Fox's face has gone through a metamorphosis as radical and dramatic as the CGI robots in the franchise that made her a star. It appears that buccal fat removal has played a massive, undeniable role in sculpting her current drastically altered appearance. A top Beverly Hills plastic surgeon noted that her facial changes have been dissected and analysed more than almost anyone else in the business. Fox effectively represents one of the most studied and debated cases of facial evolution in modern Hollywood history. Although she has remained tight-lipped and never confirmed specific surgeries, the visual evidence points to a laundry list of interventions, with buccal fat removal sitting at the top of the pile. The transformation was a slow burn at first, but things accelerated aggressively around 2019 and 2020, leading to the look we see today. Side-by-side comparison photos reveal a progressive, severe hollowing of the mid-face, where her lovely soft cheeks were excavated to create deep concavity. This aggressive tweaking created a much sharper, more angular visage that effectively erased the familiar girl we spent a decade watching on screen. Medical experts are convinced that removing the buccal fat pads is the main culprit behind this sharper, harsher, and somewhat alien aesthetic. The specific localised pattern of hollowing visible in her latest paparazzi shots is textbook evidence of surgical fat pad removal. And when you combine that with what appears to be a cocktail of other injectable procedures and tweaks, the result is jarring. It has resulted in a completely new facial architecture, totally disconnecting her from the natural beauty that launched her career. What makes Fox's transformation so particularly heartbreaking for longtime fans is how it fundamentally rewrote her original appeal. Her initial fame was built on a foundation of beauty that looks supernaturally perfect, yet somehow still touchable and real, a rare unicorn status in Hollywood. Her current look, while undeniably striking by modern influencer standards, carries a manufactured plastic quality that many critics and admirers find far less captivating than the original. One veteran entertainment journalist who has tracked Fox's career for over a decade noted that her facial structure has become a geometry lesson of sharp lines, observing that the new angularity feels completely devoid of organic softness. The truly heartbreaking part of this evolution is that we aren't talking about someone who needed a glow-up. Fox was already widely regarded as the gold standard of Hollywood perfection before she ever touched a needle. By chasing an impossible, hyper-real aesthetic, she has paradoxically stripped away the unique qualities that made her a superstar, blending into a sea of identical filtered faces rather than standing out. She effectively transitioned from possessing a face that defined a generation to sporting a generic copy-paste template that looks like it came straight out of a Beverly Hills surgeon's catalogue. If you look at the timeline closely, this drastic overhaul happened right when she was clawing her way back to the top of the A-list, coinciding perfectly with her massive career resurgence. It also synchronised with her chaotic headline-dominating romance with Machine Gun Kelly, marking a wild era where she seemed desperate to command the spotlight and redefine her public persona. This intense backdrop forces us to ask some uncomfortable questions about the psychological pressure and professional demands simmering behind the scenes. It is a tale as old as time in Tinseltown. When the career shifts gears, the face often gets a remodel to match the new vibe, driven by a fear of irrelevance during critical transition periods. According to top-tier image consultants, Fox's metamorphosis isn't just a random choice. It is a textbook example of the new era, new face syndrome that plagues the industry. Whenever a starlet prepares to relaunch her brand or enter a fresh chapter of life, the scalpel often comes out as a primary tool for reinvention, acting as a physical declaration that the past is dead. The sad reality is that the urge to look different often pushes them too far, turning what could have been a minor tweak into a major excessive overhaul that distracts from their talent. In the process, they end up erasing the signature quirks and characteristics that made the world fall in love with them back in the day, fundamentally altering their identity. The internet hasn't exactly been kind about it either. Scroll through the feeds and you will find less applause and more genuine confusion from long-time followers who feel a sense of loss. The comment sections are flooded with people mourning her former look, asking why on earth a goddess would tamper with perfection to this degree, and lamenting the loss of her natural beauty. Fox's journey should really be a cautionary tale for every up-and-coming starlet thinking about going under the knife in 2026. It proves that more isn't always better. It highlights the slippery slope of combining things like buccal fat removal with fillers. It all adds up to create a cumulative effect that looks jarringly artificial rather than refreshed. Instead of enhancing what is there, you end up with something that looks distinctly manufactured, transforming human warmth into something cold and engineered. Essentially, you risk destroying the magic sauce that got you the contract in the first place, which is a massive gamble for anyone relying on their face for a living. Now, while Meghan's shift happened over a few years, our next case study seemed to happen overnight, leaving everyone with absolute whiplash from the sudden change. This makeover was so severe that it wiped away her youth, entirely leaving audiences squinting to find traces of the girl they watched grow up on screen. Honestly, it felt like she changed absolutely everything about herself in the blink of an eye. Pass me the pins, would you? We need to talk about the shocking shift from Dove Cameron, the sweet Disney princess, to a stark, gaunt fashion plate. Growing up under the intense glare of studio lights, Dove Cameron was the quintessential girl next door for millions of kids who tuned in every week. She was famous for those adorable chipmunk cheek smiles and soft heart-shaped features that screamed innocence, approachability and wholesome charm. It was that quintessential cookie-cutter visage that the Mouse House loves to market to the tween demographic, perfectly engineered for lunchboxes and magazine covers. But the moment she decided to pivot to serious adult roles, the change was so jarring that it sent shockwaves through her entire fan base, leaving many worried about her well-being. We aren't talking about puberty here. This was a full-blown architectural restructuring of her face, with aggressive buccal fat removal appearing to be the main culprit behind the new look. Observers in the youth entertainment space noted that the backlash was intense, with accusations that she had essentially shape-shifted into a stranger to distance herself from her past. Between 2020 and 2021, the shift was so radical that loyal followers were left scratching their heads, unable to reconcile the new face with the star they knew. There were legitimate conversations floating around social media asking if this was even the same human being they had adored for years, or if she'd been replaced. Gone were the baby-faced curves, replaced instantly by razor-sharp jawlines and hollowed-out cheeks that looked severe and dramatically different from her natural structure. This was not a case of growing into one's looks. It was a stark black and white contrast that happened almost too fast for the public to process comfortably. Suddenly, every selfie and gala appearance showcased a mid-face that was sucked in tight with deep shadows carved out under the cheekbones where volume used to be. It completely rewrote the geometry of her face, abandoning the Disney softness for a silhouette that was much more severe, angular, and frankly unrecognisable. One journalist described the vibe as bordering on skeletal, noting that it stripped away the healthy fullness she once had in favour of a harsher aesthetic. That specific sunken look is the hallmark of aggressive buccal fat extraction, creating a concave void beneath the cheekbones that changes the way light hits the face. Seeing that level of facial depletion in someone barely in their mid-20s is incredibly rare and unnatural, which begs the question, what makes this specific transformation so jarring? It effectively erased the visual signature that had been her moneymaker throughout her entire teenage career, severing the visual link to her most famous roles. She traded her approachable, bubbly glow for an icy high-fashion rigidity that feels miles away from her roots and somewhat alienating to her original audience. Sure, it is a dramatic look, but it has the unfortunate side effect of adding a decade to her appearance, making her look significantly older than her actual years. A casting director put it bluntly, describing the transition as going from a glowing teen idol to looking ghostly and gaunt in record time. This situation perfectly illustrates the tightrope walk that former child stars have to navigate when they want to be taken seriously as adults in the industry. In a desperate bid to kill off their innocent personas, they often go overboard with physical alterations, pushing the envelope until they overshoot the mark entirely. Instead of looking like mature women, they accidentally fast forward the aging process, and the timing of Cameron's changes tells the whole story of this struggle. This drastic new face debuted exactly when she was pushing her darker music and edgier roles, proving it was a calculated attempt to murder her past image and force the world to see her differently. All the signs point to a drastic physical overhaul that goes far beyond simple maturation, suggesting a deliberate move to kill off her innocent image. It appears to be a cold, calculated strategy designed to violently sever any lingering mental ties the public might have to her days as a wholesome child star. A prominent casting director weighed in, noting that the industry places an almost crushing weight on former teen idols to shatter their youthful personas if they want to survive in Hollywood. Regrettably, this desperation often manifests as a chase for a hyper-specific, edgy aesthetic, a high-fashion heroin chic vibe that demands severe skeletal facial structures. The trend of Buccal fat removal, resulting in those gaunt, hollowed-out cheeks and razor-sharp angles, has essentially become the new badge of honour for former teen queens trying to scream, "I am a serious adult artist now." However, the internet remains undefeated, and the reaction across social media platforms regarding Cameron's morphed appearance has been a volatile cocktail of shock and scepticism. Instead of the applause she likely hoped for, the discourse is dominated by concerned fans expressing genuine confusion and alarm rather than blind admiration for her new look. If you scroll through the comments, it is a war zone of people noting she looks like a stranger, asking why a woman in her prime would rush to undergo such drastic aging alterations, even though Cameron is undeniably crushing it in her post-Disney era, securing roles and climbing the charts. Veteran industry watchers argue that her severe cosmetic shift highlights a darker, more toxic reality that plagues child stars transitioning into adulthood. The overwhelming pressure to completely reinvent themselves visually often drives them toward irreversible surgeries that will last long after the edgy trend and the career phase that demanded it has faded away. Now let's pivot to our final subject, who represents an entirely different beast in the world of celebrity facial transformation. We are looking at a case study embedded deep within a massive decade-long narrative of physical reinvention that has sparked equal parts obsession and outrage among the public. We are talking about the one and only Khloe Kardashian and the undeniable harsh reality of her facial evolution. Unlike traditional Hollywood A-listers who burst onto the scene with a polished, set-in-stone look, Khloe's entire physical journey has been documented under the microscope of reality TV cameras. We didn't just see the before and after, we watched her face morph in real-time season by agonising season on Keeping Up with the Kardashians and every spin-off that followed. This literal frame-by-frame visual diary creates an irrefutable timeline, making the structural changes to her visage impossible to ignore. The alterations, specifically what surgeons identify as textbook buccal fat removal, are glaringly obvious because we have terabytes of footage to compare against. Although she has famously denied specific invasive procedures, a celebrity image expert tracking the Calabasas clan notes that fans are convinced the surgery played a major role in her shrinking face. What makes the case of Khloe so incredibly fascinating is the sheer volume of evidence available to the public. There is an endless archive of high-definition documentation that captures every single angle of her face over the last 15 years. Audiences have essentially watched a stop-motion film of her face transforming, creating a record of cosmetic intervention that is rare even in Tinseltown. The most jarring shift in Kardashian's facial architecture seemed to hit overdrive around 2018 and 2019, where social media posts unveiled a shockingly more sculpted mid-face. The charming natural fullness that once defined her cheeks vanished, replaced by a severe hollowed-out trench, sitting right beneath her cheekbones, crafting an angular aerodynamic look that completely overwrote her recognisable features. As the expert pointed out, the smoking gun here is that her cheeks remain suspiciously hollow even during periods when her body weight fluctuated upward. That is one of the definitive biological tells that separates surgical intervention from good old-fashioned gym work or dieting. Even when Chloe appeared curvier or gained weight in other parts of her body, that vacuum-sealed look beneath her cheekbones never wavered a consistency that screams permanent removal of the buccal fat pad rather than any natural metabolic change. What makes Kardashian's metamorphosis truly significant is that it happened inside a family dynamic, where extreme body modification isn't just accepted. It is practically the family business model and a celebrated pillar of their brand. While most celebs try to gaslight the public by downplaying their work, the Kardashian empire was built on the spectacle of constant high-gloss physical upgrades. But as one social media analyst observed regarding celebrity image management, whatever she did to achieve this look, it took away far more soul than it added in style. The tragic irony of Chloe's quest for a snatched and filtered perfection is that in chasing this generic Instagram face ideal, she erased the unique distinctive heritage features that actually set her apart from her sisters and gave her character. Those hollow cheeks might align with current beauty trends, but they have homogenized her look, diminishing her individuality within the family's shared aesthetic. It is also impossible to ignore that the timing of her most radical facial changes aligned perfectly with her most turbulent years of public scrutiny, dealing with humiliating relationship scandals and the pressures of new motherhood, all while the world watched. This backdrop forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about how relentless public bullying drives celebrities to mutilate their own faces, especially for someone like Chloe, who spent years being the punchline of cruel jokes comparing her to her petite siblings. The analyst explained that Chloe's predicament reflects a brutal double bind that traps so many women in the spotlight. The public ruthlessly mocked her original face, and now that she has changed it to appease them, they ruthlessly mock her for being plastic. This buccal fat removal look, which creates a face that pops under studio lights and iPhone filters, is seductive for stars whose entire existence depends on looking flawless on a screen. The reaction to Chloe's unrecognisable new era remains deeply polarised across the internet, with stan accounts praising the so-called glow-up, while others mourn the loss of authenticity and worry about the toxic beauty standards being sold to millions of followers. The comment sections are turning into a total battlefield split between fans worshipping her intense commitment to physical perfection and critics wondering if the obsession has gone too far. But beneath the surface-level praise, there is a darker conversation brewing about the psychological fallout of these extreme makeovers and what it really does to a person's mind to constantly reinvent their own face. For the entire generation of young women currently thinking about going under the knife, the Kardashian evolution serves as the ultimate high-stakes warning label about the reality of cosmetic enhancements. It highlights exactly how a laundry list of interventions, especially that rumoured buccal fat removal that gives the hollowed-out look, can stack up to create a jarring cumulative impact that looks anything but natural. We are witnessing a shift so profound that it fundamentally overwrites her facial identity, risking a deep sense of dissociation where the reflection in the mirror might start to look like a stranger. This creates a massive, disturbing disconnect between the polished public icon we see on screens and the actual human being underneath the layers of modification.